How ancient philosophers shaped modern thought. What if the answers to modern life's biggest questions were written thousands of years ago? What if the way we think, govern, and even define morality all traces back to a handful of brilliant minds from the ancient world? Stay with us as we unveil how ancient philosophers laid the foundations for modern thought. Welcome to Cerebro Ethos. If you're passionate about philosophy, history, and the wisdom of the ages, you've come to the right place. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Now, let's journey back in time. 1. The roots of philosophy. Before we had laws, structured governments, or even writing, humanity was already asking profound questions. What does it mean to live a good life? What is justice? How do we understand the world around us? These weren't just passing thoughts, they were the seeds of philosophy, sprouting in the earliest civilizations. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, kings and priests pondered the divine order of the universe. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest legal codes, reflected an early attempt to define justice, not through personal whims but through structured, enforceable laws. Was justice an extension of the gods' will? Or was it something humans could reason through? These questions echoed through the ages. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt, morality was deeply tied to spirituality. The concept of Maat, the goddess of truth and balance, governed not only the afterlife but also daily conduct. Egyptians believed that after death, one's heart was weighed against a feather. A heavy heart burdened with wrongdoing would be devoured, while a light heart granted passage to eternal peace. Could morality be measured? Was justice universal? These were philosophical ideas, even if the Egyptians didn't use that word yet. Further east, the Indus Valley civilization developed ethical principles reflected in later Vedic texts. Concepts like dharma, or duty, emerged, suggesting that morality was not just about individual choices, but about maintaining balance within society. But while these civilizations laid the foundation for moral and ethical thought, it was ancient Greece that transformed philosophy into a formal discipline. Unlike earlier societies, where wisdom was often tied to religion, the Greeks sought rational explanations for existence, ethics, and governance. They didn't just accept divine law, they questioned it. And so, in the bustling agora of Athens, the great minds of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle would emerge, challenging the status quo and reshaping human thought forever. But how did their ideas endure? And why do we still 2. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy. Imagine walking through the streets of ancient Athens, where merchants trade their goods, politicians debate laws, and citizens discuss the nature of life itself. In the heart of this intellectual hub was a man who never wrote a single book, never held political office, and yet changed the course of human thought forever. His name? Socrates. Socrates wasn't a statesman, a poet, or a warrior. He was a relentless questioner. Unlike the scholars of his time who taught by lecturing or reciting doctrines, Socrates taught through dialogue. Instead of giving answers, he asked probing questions that forced people to rethink their assumptions. This technique, known today as the Socratic method, remains one of the most powerful tools for uncovering truth. Socrates, what is justice? Young Athenian, well, justice is following the law. Socrates, but are all laws just? Young Athenian, I suppose not. Socrates, then if a law is unjust, is following it still justice? Young Athenian, I don't know. This was Socrates' brilliance. He made people question everything. He believed that true wisdom began with admitting ignorance. His famous declaration, "I know that I know nothing," wasn't an admission of defeat, it was a challenge. A challenge to question, to explore, and to never accept ideas at face value. But his relentless questioning made him enemies. Many powerful Athenians saw him as a troublemaker, a corrupter of youth. In 399 BCE, Socrates was put on trial for impiety and corrupting the minds of the young. His defense? He didn't argue for his innocence, he argued for the pursuit of truth. He famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." To Socrates, living blindly without questioning one's beliefs or the society around them was the greatest tragedy of all. Despite his arguments, he was sentenced to death by poison. His followers, including Plato, urged him to flee, but Socrates refused. He accepted his fate, believing that standing by his principles was more important than life itself. His death wasn't the end, it was the beginning. His ideas survived through the works of his students, especially Plato and Aristotle, shaping philosophy, ethics, law, and education for centuries to come. Today, his Socratic method forms the foundation of legal cross-examinations, scientific inquiry, and even modern-day debates. So the next time you ask why, again and again, until you reach the core of an idea, you're following in the footsteps of the greatest questioner in history. 3. Plato, the architect of idealism. If Socrates was the great questioner, then Plato was the great builder. Where Socrates dismantled ideas through questioning, Plato took those fragments and constructed a vision of an ideal world. A world ruled not by power, wealth, or birthright, but by wisdom and reason. Plato was Socrates' most devoted student. After his teacher's execution, he sought to preserve and expand upon his ideas. But he didn't just record philosophy, he revolutionized it. In 387 BCE, Plato established the Academy, the first great center of learning in the Western world. It wasn't just a school, it was an intellectual sanctuary where students debated justice, ethics, and politics. Even centuries later, this institution inspired universities as we know them today. But perhaps Plato's most famous work is The Republic, where he laid out his vision for a perfect society. Plato believed that only the wisest, the philosopher kings, should rule. He argued that most people are blinded by illusions, driven by desires and opinions rather than reason and truth. True leadership, he insisted, must belong to those who seek wisdom above all else. And how did he explain this? With one of the most famous metaphors in history, the allegory of the cave. Plato described a group of prisoners trapped in a cave since birth, facing a wall where shadows flicker from a fire behind them. These shadows are all they've ever known. To them, this is reality. But one day, one prisoner escapes. He emerges into the sunlight and realizes that the shadows were mere illusions. True reality exists outside the cave. When he returns to free the others, they refuse to believe him. They are too accustomed to the shadows. Plato's message: most people live in ignorance, mistaking illusions for truth. Only through wisdom and self-examination can we escape our mental caves and see reality for what it truly is. Even today, this allegory applies. Think of how media, propaganda, or personal biases can shape our perception of truth. Plato's cave warns us: if we never seek knowledge beyond our comfort zone, we will remain prisoners of our own limited understanding. Plato's impact stretches far beyond philosophy. His ideas influenced political science, psychology, education, and ethics. The dream of a just society, ruled by wisdom instead of power, still echoes in debates about government and leadership today. And yet, Plato wasn't the last great thinker. His most brilliant student would take his ideas even further, grounding philosophy not in ideal forms, but in observable reality. Next, we meet the philosopher who laid the foundation for science, logic, and reason itself, Aristotle. For Aristotle, the master of logic. If Plato was the idealist, imagining a world of perfect forms, then Aristotle was the realist, grounding philosophy in observation, analysis, and experience. Aristotle wasn't just a student of Plato, he was the one who challenged and expanded his teacher's ideas. While Plato looked to abstract ideals, Aristotle believed that truth comes from studying the world as it is. His philosophy was simple: to understand anything, we must observe, analyze, and categorize it. This systematic approach laid the foundation for science, logic, and even psychology. His influence is so vast that even today, we use Aristotle's methods in problem-solving, debate, and ethical decision-making. The birth of logic. Ever heard this phrase? All men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. This is a syllogism, one of Aristotle's greatest contributions to philosophy. He invented formal logic, the structured way of reasoning that still shapes law, science, and artificial intelligence today. In Aristotle's view, knowledge wasn't something mystical. It had rules, structures, and categories. If we understood these rules, we could understand the world. Virtue ethics: how to live a good life. Beyond logic, Aristotle asked the big question: what does it mean to live a good life? His answer: balance. He developed virtue ethics, arguing that moral behavior lies in finding the middle ground between extremes. Example: too much courage, you become reckless. Too little, you become a coward. The virtue moderation. This golden mean, still influences modern psychology, self-improvement, and leadership training. Aristotle's impact on politics and government. Aristotle didn't just study ethics, he studied politics. He analyzed monarchies, democracies, and oligarchies, asking, what is the best form of government? His conclusion, it depends on the people. A government should serve its citizens, balancing power between the rulers and the ruled, an idea that directly influenced modern democracy. From science and logic to ethics and politics, Aristotle's impact is everywhere. His teachings shaped everything from the Renaissance to the Enlightenment, and even today, his ideas on rational thought, leadership, and human potential continue to inspire. But Aristotle's influence didn't stop in Greece. His ideas journeyed across the ancient world, influencing thinkers from Rome to the Islamic Golden Age. 5. Stoicism, enduring wisdom for challenging times. As the Roman Empire expanded, so did its philosophy. But unlike the idealism of Plato or the logic of Aristotle, the Romans needed something practical, a philosophy to endure hardship, chaos, and change. This was Stoicism. The Stoic masters, philosophy as a way of life. 3 key thinkers shaped this philosophy. Seneca, the politician who balanced power with wisdom. Epictetus, the former slave who proved that freedom lies in the mind. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome with discipline and humility. Unlike other philosophies that focused on debating truth, Stoicism was about action. It taught that happiness doesn't come from wealth, status, or control, but from mastering your own mind. Finding peace in chaos. The Stoics believed that suffering isn't caused by events, it's caused by our reaction to them. Lose your wealth, accept it with grace. Insulted by an enemy, their words don't define you. Facing death, it's part of nature, why fear it? Marcus Aurelius, in his private journal Meditations, reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Stoicism and modern mindset, still relevant today. If these ideas sound familiar, that's because they still shape modern self-improvement and psychology. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is built on Stoic principles, changing your thoughts to change your emotions. The focus on what you can control, mindset is taught in sports, leadership, and mental health. Stoic ideas inspire Navy SEALs, CEOs, and athletes to push through discomfort and stay calm under pressure. Stoic virtues, a guide to living well. The Stoics taught 4 main virtues that still resonate today. Wisdom, see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. Courage, face challenges without fear. Justice, treat others with fairness and integrity. Temperance, stay balanced, avoid excess and indulgence. Stoicism in action, a Roman example. Story time, imagine being Marcus Aurelius. You're the emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world. Yet your empire is at war, a deadly plague is spreading, and your own generals conspire against you. What do? Do you panic, seek revenge, collapse under pressure? No, you stay disciplined. You remind yourself, as Marcus did, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. This is Stoicism in action. No excuses, no self-pity, just action and inner peace. Closing thoughts, why Stoicism still matters. The world changes, but human struggles remain the same. Uncertainty, loss, fear, these challenges existed in Rome and they exist today. That's why Stoicism never faded. That's why leaders, thinkers, and everyday people still turn to it. That's why you can apply it in your own life. So ask yourself, what do you truly control? Because the answer to that question determines your freedom. Now here's a question for you. Which ancient philosopher do you resonate with the most? Let us know in the comments. Do you seek wisdom like Socrates, idealism like Plato, practicality like Aristotle, or resilience like the Stoics? As we continue navigating the complexities of modern life, perhaps the best guidance comes from the past. The wisdom of ancient philosophers is timeless, and their impact is woven into the very fabric of our society.